everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cutting Room Floor here at Grace Church. My name is Larry. I'm joined by Taylor Brown, our family and teaching pastor. And Taylor, you led us in a standalone sermon this week. We were in between sermon series. But not unrelated to what we've been talking about.
Right.
So we just came out of this series on practicing the way. And one of the practices that John Mark Comer highlights is simplicity. Yeah. So you took us through a sermon on simplicity about letting go of excess to make space for what matters.
Yeah.
Get us started with what's the most random thing that you've held on to for too long?
This is such a good question.
It's a great question.
A couple of contenders. So, back in, this had to have been, was it middle school or high school? I had to do a project where I had to write a letter to someone, like someone famous. It was like, I was thinking of, it was like a letter writing assignment and how to format a letter and all that. But our teacher told us we had to send it to someone famous, like write it to them, and that she would actually send the letters. It was really cool. And so I wrote mine to, of course, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Of course.
The quarterback was Donovan McNabb at the time. So I wrote it to Donovan McNabb. Yeah, are you shocked that I'm talking about the Eagles still? Hey, it's been less than a month since the Super Bowl. I still have a grace period. And so they actually replied back to me. It was the coolest thing. Like only a handful of these letters ever got responses, but she had mail one day. And I have the envelope still. That it was a manila envelope, but it had the official Philadelphia Eagles sticker on it. And they sent me a letter back with some stuff in it. That is still in my nightstand.
So you still have it?
I still have it.
Do you think you've held on to it for too long?
Never. No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
I just had that for a while.
Okay.
One thing that I would say has been too long is I noticed this in my parents' house when I was over there with my kids the other day. So my parents live in the same house since from the time I was born to now.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I still have my books as a kid are still in their house. My books as a elementary schooler are still there, and some of them are like old and you can tell the pages are faded.
Yeah.
For me, that was the one I'm like, wait a minute, why have I kept these here this whole time? Why have I been don't throw these away, hang on to these?
Yeah.
That's the one for me that I was pondering recently. Why do I still have a bookshelf full of books that I read in 5th grade at my parents' house still?
So I had a tote of books that came from my dad's house. We didn't hold on to them for too long. We quickly went through them and thought, is there anything in here the girls will read?
Yeah.
And the rest of it went goodbye.
Sure.
I do think the thing that I've probably held on to for too long in that was my Ninja Turtles collection.
Yes. Amen.
I'm into my mid-30s and still had my kindergarten backpack, which was Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
My mom had puff painted my name on it. Puff painted mostly flaked off, but I had all my Ninja Turtles action figures.
Oh my gosh.
I have 3 girls. They're not into Ninja Turtles.
No, they don't know. If you talked about Michelangelo, they're like, who's that?
And some of them I can remember saving cereal box tops for and having to send in. That's how I got the Super Shredder.
Yes.
So right before we moved to Florida, I gave them to one of my best friend, Adam, gave them to his boys.
Oh, there it is.
I hope they've still got them. But, man, I held on to those for way too long. One day, I'm going to do something with these
You think
turtles.
one day this will happen. Yeah.
And I finally did I held on to them for too long.
I still think my favorite, though, that out of that, to answer that question, I think Kip's has been the best. You want to share about this? Kip preached this message at our Central campus.
Yeah, so Kip Martin was up at the Central campus. You can go watch the message if you want to. He has his birthday present from his 8th birthday.
Incredible.
And Kip's 60.
Yeah.
And
incredible.
It's an Orange Crate bike. He was he even said, he goes, I don't ride it anymore. And I said to the person next to me, it'd be really weird if he did. But he still has it. And it's incredible. He's got it. It's in incredible shape, but it's one of those okay, why are we still holding on to this?
50-some years later.
Yeah.
That's
incredible. And it looks in perfect shape. It's
that's
incredible.
My favorite one I've heard. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So we didn't want to make this all about stuff, not just about, but it is kind of a starting place for for a lot of us. So you used an illustration about what to do with your stuff when traveling.
Yes, yeah.
Like I was here at the Cape campus for the 8:00 service, and I could feel my own anxiety building as you went through this because, like, when I travel, I'm the TSA nut. Like, absolutely, I'm checking all of my kids' bags. Like, it is my personal goal to never get stopped.
Yes.
And when we do, I take it really personally.
Oh, I do too. Like, I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
so
yeah.
Last time, Selah had just gotten this weighted stuffed animal. Like, her favorite thing right now is Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah.
So she has a Stitch, but it's weighted, and it's whatever the weights are made out of tripped up the TSA computer.
Yeah.
And she had put it in my bag. So when they flagged my bag, I'm going in my mind like, what did I do wrong? All of a sudden, they pull that Stitch out. I'm like, this is your fault, little one. But like, so my anxiety's building as you go through that. But really, you were trying to help us connect to our everyday struggle with stuff.
Yeah. Like, for me, the microcosm of traveling on an airplane is I have to ask 100 different questions about my stuff. Mm-hmm. I feel pressure to keep up with my stuff. I feel stress, and let's be real. I've joked about this with people. Like, I haven't said this from a stage before, but I've joked about this with people. So people that have heard this joke will know, like, oh, here he goes again. Yeah. I feel like my life is completely taken apart when I go through TSA.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like I've been through a tornado.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm the guy who, like, I get all my stuff because, you know, like, your shoes are off, your belt's off, your phone's in your hand, along with your wallet and keys, and your bag is open. They already went through it. Like, I'm the guy who takes, like, 6 minutes after TSA is done to just stand there at the table and get everything back in order. Because it feels like my life is disrupted.
My dear brother, TSA pre-check will avoid all of that for you.
So listen, secret, I just signed up for it a year ago. It has changed my life.
Yeah, it was
changed
worth
my
the
life.
$80.
Oh yeah, $80 for like 5 years. I'm like, I'm paying this every time. Yeah, no, I just did it, and it's a game changer, especially when I go through Atlanta.
Yeah, gosh.
Oh boy, it saves me an hour.
Yeah.
So like, for me, when I think about the pressure and the burden and the chaos and just the consumption that my stuff has in my mind during travel, for me, it's symbolic of what happens often in life in general. Mm-hmm. Yes. Where for me it becomes this obsession. And that obsession is different. I tried to kind of frame this. Like, sometimes it's obsession of wanting more, like just more stuff.
Right.
Sometimes it's obsession of wanting better stuff. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's an obsession with just a collection of stuff. Sometimes just an obsession with some stuff, meaning, like, I don't have a bunch of possessions, but I've got a few really important ones that have kind of taken the throne of my heart instead of allowing Jesus to sit there. And so for me, it was this visual of, like, the stress, the anxiety, the pressure that it takes to keep up with your stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's a microcosm for me of what life looks like for a lot of us.
Yeah, and you brought us to Luke 12, where Jesus says not to worry about our stuff, the material stuff. But what I thought was really insightful is you went to the Greek word there for worry is just this general idea of being unsettled or anxious.
Yes.
So then now this applies to stuff that's not even material stuff. It's the stuff here and around me.
Correct. Yeah. And what Jesus does here is really, really incredible. So he says this countercultural message to them. And I try to hammer this home. Like, it's countercultural to us today because, well, we, especially those of us that live in the United States, have a large obsession and captivation with stuff. Mm-hmm. We just do. We're very materialistic.
How many football fields did you say?
50. 50 football fields of storage space in Cape Coral, Florida alone.
That's crazy.
And so we're obsessed with stuff. We really are. And what Jesus said then, though, is it's still a countercultural message because back then there was a high worry. And it took a lot of intentionality, a lot of work to be able to have the wealth needed and good social standing needed to live back then. And so what Jesus says is, and I try to make this clear in the sermon, he's not saying don't think about that stuff, as in like, you don't have to even consider it, you'll just figure it out. Like, no, there's intentionality still required. But what he's saying is don't let your soul be uneased or unsettled about it. That word there that's used of worry, it's also used in times where, like, the soul's wound up or kind of like tense or kind of like imagine like kind of making clenching your fists and holding your breath and not letting go and not exhaling. Yeah. It's that kind of a feeling around it. And so what Jesus is trying to get at is to having a different mindset. And I think our mind and heart are connected on this one, Where yes, I think it's is our heart and love with our stuff, but also what Jesus is trying to get us is to have a different mindset about these things. We don't need to be unsettled about them, but we can trust that God will be our provider and care for us.
Yeah, and you brought to this idea of do you own your stuff or does your stuff own you?
Right. Yeah, which is a
Well,
hard
great
question. It's a hard question to ask. Yeah. And even, it's been funny because I told the garage story with the mouse in it, which is just, ridiculous and true, by the way. I know sometimes people are like, hey, I know pastor stories.
This was not a preacher story.
No, this was not. It was this Christmas where this happened. December 23rd was the night that I discovered my friend in the garage, and we cleaned the garage about a few days later.
Yeah.
Our family had the flu over Christmas, so we had to get better from that, and then we cleaned the garage the next couple of days after. And so for me, it was that moment of reminding, like, wow, there's so much junk in here. But even last night when I'm in my house and I forget, I looked in a cabinet or a room or something, I can't remember. And I looked and went, wow, this is another, I want to do some work in here to get some of this out. Because this has taken over, an unhealthy part of my life. And so, there's this feeling of sometimes our stuff does own us. Yeah. And I don't think, here's something I didn't touch on in the sermon. I don't think that always. I think some of us come by this honestly.
Okay.
Meaning, I don't think that there's not malicious intent here. There's not like I'm going to go spend all my money on XYZ. I think for some of us, there's a bunch of different things. Some of us, we grew up not having a lot at all. Some of us had really hard childhoods and upbringings, and we didn't have a lot at all. And so we want to overcompensate in a way that we might not even be aware of. Yeah. And make sure that. I grew up with nothing in the fridge, so I'm going to overstock my fridge. I grew up with nothing in the pantry, so I'm going to make sure I get my kids everything in the pantry. Hear me, so that's one place I think we've come by this honestly. Another place is truthfully, it's coping. Yeah. And it's us dealing with brokenness and hurt, and for some of us, the way that we cope with that is to distract ourselves with possessions and with things or with buying. We joke about, retail therapy.
Oh, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And hear me, while hear me, I would much rather have a conversation about how to budget for buying things to cope rather than having a loved one who's addicted maybe to drugs, alcohol, something that could literally kill them physically. But it's still a way of coping. And it still needs to be addressed. And guess what? 12 steps are for that too. Yep. Of a shopping addiction or kind of even a possession addiction. But there's ways we've come by this honestly.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I didn't get to touch on that. I was already a few minutes over anyways in the sermon. But I didn't get to touch on that. And I think that's an important distinction to understand that this is not about like I'm willingly choosing to go be owned by my stuff. Yeah. This is sometimes we come by this honestly because we're trying to cope with pain and trauma, or we're trying to overcompensate and make sure that we provide more than enough for our family. So there's a few different areas here where I think we come by it honestly.
I remember being a kid going to my great grandma Stevens' house and being appalled at her back porch was just full of empty butter and Cool Whip dishes. Did not understand until I got older and realized she had lived through the Great Depression.
Yes.
So she could not fathom disposing of a perfectly good container.
That's it.
And so it became this endearing thing after she died as we're cleaning out all this stuff. Like this was her way of it wasn't overcompensation, but it was also I came from nothing. Yes. Like I can remember, and some people still do this, I can remember watching her wash out Ziploc bags, drying them on a jar to use them again because there's nothing wrong with that bag.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great example of it's not this. She didn't willingly go, I'm going to hoard all these Cool Whip containers. No, it was because of her lived experience. This was an impact that she didn't even realize at the time, that we're looking back now. Yeah, that's a great example of it. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, that's good. I think I'm glad you brought that in. Yeah. So in talking about this mindset of simplicity, not just with our stuff, but just in the way we live, you gave us two different examples from the Gospels that are very different in the simplistic way they approach Jesus. So you gave us the rich young ruler and the widow's offering, the poor widow, both from the Gospel of Mark. Incidentally, talk us through the rich young ruler first.
Yeah, so the rich young ruler is a story that Mark writes, and once again, for both of these, we have some info, but we don't have a lot.
Right.
So we don't know their name. We know that this person that's described by the author is rich, so they have some considerable wealth, and that they're in a position of authority. They're a ruler, which means that according to the world then, they had some power, prestige, popularity, like they had some position. So the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, teacher. So he calls him teacher, which is an indicator here that he knows he's heard about Jesus. He's heard that he's a rabbi. He's heard that he's been teaching. So, teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus replies and lists these commands, lists the law, if you will. Honor your father and mother, don't commit adultery, you kind of the checklist.
Check.
Yeah, and the rich young ruler goes, check, 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 check. I got all those. And he says, I've been doing this since I was a young boy. And then Jesus responds again and says, well, first he looks at him with love, and then he says, well, here's one thing you lack, a.k.a. here's what you're missing. Here's the missing piece. Because he's coming to Jesus knowing that something's not quite right.
Right.
And so Jesus finally addresses it head on and says, here's what you're missing. Here's what you lack. He says, go and sell all your stuff and donate it to the poor and then come and follow me. And with this, the man went away sad and says, because he had great wealth. And so what we see here is this rich young ruler is curious, we'll say he's at least trying to follow the Lord in some way.
Yeah,
I mean that would seem to indicate that if he's saying I want to inherit life eternal, and he's saying I'm keeping the law, that would indicate what scholars would say is that would indicate that there's some sort of religiosity here.
Yeah.
I'll word it loosely like that.
Yeah, sure.
There's at least a minimum of religiosity here. He's following the authority of some ruler, God, Lord, whoever. But what we also see here is he's not just serving that; he's trying to appease his wealth too.
Yeah.
And his wealth has become so great that what we see is it's become a distraction, a hindrance of him to follow Jesus. Because Jesus names it. He says, here's what you're missing. What you're missing is you got to be willing to, would you be willing to sell it all and then come follow me?
And he can't reconcile the two.
He can't reconcile the two, which fits perfectly with Jesus' words of no one can serve two masters.
Yeah.
Like it fits this. The rich young ruler lives this out to a T. Because he's trying to reconcile both of these. He's trying to reconcile living with serving the Lord, seeking life eternal, following the commands of the law, but then he's also trying to reconcile his great wealth.
Yeah.
And it becomes this tug of war, if you will, which is why he goes away sad because he has great wealth. Someone came up to me, too, a young adult, and we're going to continue the conversation in a couple weeks when we get together, and he said, I find it interesting because, of course, it would be hard to give up everything or give up a lot, and it'd be a whole lot easier to give up a little. I thought that was fascinating, and for me, it's the perspective of what's considered a lot and what's considered a little.
Yeah, which is a great segue.
Exactly.
Into the poor widow.
Exactly.
She gave a little, but it was all she had.
It was all she had. Yeah.
It was all she had. So the question is, between the two, like, what are we holding onto our stuff so tightly that it becomes the hindrance?
Right.
Like, so we see a willingness in the poor widow to give all she had, even though it was very little, to God. She's clearly not holding on to this tightly, and that's what the rich young ruler is having a hard time figuring out is, can I trust God while still clinging to this?
Exactly. And I try to make it clear at the end of like we miss the point between the two stories and the compare contrast. If our takeaway is like, so you're telling me I need to sell all my stuff?
Yeah.
Because like that's not the takeaway.
Right.
What the takeaway is to notice how for the rich young ruler, stuff became an obstacle, a hindrance, a block for him to follow the Lord. For the widow, it became just another aspect of following God. Where she didn't have this hindrance or this hold or this obstacle or this block. She was able to give that, to follow the Lord. And so for us, it's not so much like it's not will you sell your car, because that's what Jesus is saying, but it's saying, would you be willing to sell your car? And hold on to it. Yes, hold on to it, but hold on to it loosely. if that's what the Lord told you to do. I just talked with someone after the service who was like, doggone it, man. And this is always the best when people come up to me and do this. They go, doggone it, man. Don't you know that all week I've been kind of contemplating, do I need to make this, do this big thing and kind of reconcile something financially?
Yeah.
I've been praying about it. And he goes, don't you know, I didn't know what you were preaching on, and this is what you're preaching on. I got a lot to consider. Yeah. But that's the Spirit. Yeah. That's the Spirit. Because what this guy didn't do is walk away and go, all right, well, I got to sell not just that, but this and this and this and this. I got to sell everything. But now it's this. For him, it was this reconciling of like, is this what God's asking me to do? So I can better follow Him. Because what it would mean for him, his example is, I'm having to work so many hours overtime to make up for this. I'm having to really, spend a lot of time at work, a lot of time not doing the things I know I need to do, in order to make this happen. When if I do this decision to live a simpler life, to let go of an element of stuff. It's less time at work, more time with family, more time with the Lord. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to get at with this.
And I want us to get practical with this. Yeah. But I think that's really where it goes. We're not just talking about minimalism.
Right.
Like, I live with a minimalist. God bless my wife. Yeah. She makes this work. I was a slow adopter to minimalism, but I found great freedom in it once I embraced it. We're talking about biblical simplicity, which goes beyond the possessions we have.
It's beyond it, yeah.
So what are some of the practical takeaways you hope folks have in this idea of just living simply before the Lord?
Yeah. I think couple things. The first is I want to actually go back to what I threw in earlier that I didn't mention in the sermon about how we came by this honestly. Mm-hmm. For some of us, we have to go back to that root, truly the roots of this. Mm-hmm. And then work our way up from there.
Sure.
Meaning, we have to discover what it is in us that drives us to have this compulsion towards stuff.
Yeah.
And we have to at least name that and begin considering that in our heart and mind before the Lord.
Yeah.
And hear me, that might be with the work of a trusted friend, a mentor, a pastor, a counselor, a therapist. Like I'm not recommending you can do that alone, but if you're finding like, whoa, I feel like there's some real stuff here. There's generational stuff here. There's I have some insecurity about this. Then share that conversation with someone else.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing. Is if you do have this drive and this propensity, borderline maybe addiction to stuff, really like dig in and go, where's that come from? What triggers that in me if I need to go buy?
Yeah.
You do some work there. That's the first thing.
Okay.
The next thing up is I would say, it's what I said yesterday, is to identify what is the excess in your life.
Yeah.
Is it stuff? Is it schedule? And there's just too much on your calendar? Is it financial? So maybe it's not like possessions around you, but it's an obsession with how much is in that account. Is it technology? Yeah. Is it entertainment? Is it media? Doom scrolling? Is it too much unhealthy content like binge watching or listening to music that's not life giving? Whatever it is. Identify what's the excess that is being a hindrance, a distraction for you to be able to follow Jesus more clearly. To name that and be honest about it. And then I think once you name it, if it's stuff, for example, if we got too much stuff, start small. So it's going to be really hard if you look around your house and every room has some excess.
Yeah.
And you go, that's it. This weekend we're getting everything out.
Yeah.
It's too overwhelming. So if it's stuff, start with a room or a drawer or a closet or a cabinet. Start there. And look and ask yourself the question, what do I truly need?
Yeah.
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
That's a huge question of not what do I want, but at the end of the day, what do I truly need?
Yeah.
Because the answer for some might be minimalism, but for others it might not be full blown minimalism.
Yeah.
Like one thing I love about John Mark Comer, who authors Practicing the Way, is he talks about like minimalism in his wardrobe. Like if you read the chapter in Ruthless Elimination of Hurry or in Practicing the Way, he talks about it too.
Dude owns like 12 pieces of clothing.
Yeah, it's like 12 pieces of clothing, and for me, I'm like awesome.
Yeah. But no.
I don't think I could. I don't think I could ever get there.
Yeah.
But then I'm also challenged to go, okay, but what could I get there with?
Right.
And what areas is God calling me to really just look at what I need?
Yeah.
And donate the rest. So if it's stuff, start small. Start in a room and ask that question, what do I need? If it's schedule, if that's where it's the excess is you need to cut, say no or cancel one thing this week.
And no is a complete sentence.
No is a complete sentence. And once again, I would say the question of need versus want.
Yeah.
So what are the things I need to do this week?
Yeah.
I have
and
to
again,
do.
Start small. You
start
said
small.
Cancel one thing.
One thing.
Say no to
one thing. Just one thing. If it's financial, and this could go a whole lot of ways depending on what the financial piece is. But it might be kind of less obsession over an account, checking that less.
Yeah.
It might be stepping into generosity and giving some away. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. Yeah. And there's a whole lot there depending on the circumstance.
And I think with all this, the idea of starting small or for a frame leads into Lent really well.
It does.
We're starting this season of self-reflection and repentance and preparing ourselves for new life leading up to Easter. This is a great time to try some of this stuff out. And you led us there in the message. And I've been thinking about that in myself. Like, what do I need to lay down?
Yep.
Even if just for a season to make more room for the things of God. Now, I could go like huge on it and say, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone at all.
Correct.
No social media.
Correct.
So I've zeroed in that. I think the thing that drains the most life out of me right now when it comes to my phone is I'm a political junkie. And you know this about me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read news. Sure. I'm not going to interact with news during the season of Lent. And I'm going to fill that time with Scripture.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a small piece because my first piece was I'm deleting social media off my phone. I'm getting rid of TikTok. I'm going to do one thing.
Totally.
And that's this simplistic idea.
And so here's what's awesome. Let's take this as a real example. Yep. So because I was going to say technology is another piece for me.
Yep.
This, and I might not. I'm going to do kind of a few areas in this, like something small in a few areas. Yeah. Technology is one that I'm going to do something in. So for you named it. You're like, I can't look at news. I'm giving that up. So for me, we're inverted. For me, it's where I get drained the most is when I spend time on social media because I will doom scroll. It'll awaken up my comparison minion in my brain, and then he just goes ballistic. I find myself not productive, kind of lethargic after it, and so for me, I can keep the news app on my phone because I'm able, for whatever reason right now I'm able to read that and be okay, but I'm going to delete social media off my phone and do something else during that time. And so that's a great example of like there's not a prescriptive you have to do this, but it's determining what it is that is serving as the obstacle, serving as the block. And then do something about that.
And I'm not saying social media is totally bad for you. I'm not saying reading the news is totally bad for me. But am I holding too tightly to it?
That's just it. Yes.
And I think right now I am. I think we're both going to find this idea of biblical simplicity in it. Like if somebody launches a nuclear device, please, Taylor, during Lent, come and tell me.
I'll let you know. You had no idea?
If somebody trashes you on social media,
please let me know.
I'm going to let you know. But the idea is finding this where we can cut back. And find life in it, because where you landed the whole thing in Luke 12 is where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And your treasure can't be in social media.
No.
My treasure can't be in political news.
No. And I said this. I'll say again the line that I said at the 11 o'clock service. So just a behind the curtain writing note, I never actually, I wrote a full out manuscript up until that big idea, which life is found in Christ within me, not stuff around me. And the rest was just like bullet point. I didn't have I didn't have like the ending solidified. And so I was trying to put words to it. And what's funny is it took 2 services for me to put words to what I was trying to get at. Well, I felt like I kind of said something at 8 and I kind of said something at 9:30, but 11 I was able to I was able to crystallize it, like what I was trying to get at. And so for that verse, there are times where I feel like I'm convicted by this question. If people looked at my treasure, would they be able to see a heart that desires and follows Christ? And I honestly had a hard time answering that question. Because I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know if they would. That's what I want to do. But once again, no one can serve 2 masters. And so for me, it's been this convicting question of when I read those words from Jesus, it's like, what do I need to do when it comes to my treasure, aka my stuff around me, to position myself in a way to live simply, a life of simplicity, that when people look at the treasures around me, they know that there's a heart that desires and values Christ there. And not just the stuff, or not just the, whatever it is, glitz or glamour, or whatever it might be. I've been convicted by that.
Yeah.
And so I'm living it out. I joked during one of the services too. I said, I'm just preaching to myself, and y'all get to listen in today.
Yeah. Basically, y'all are just observing.
Right, you're just observing a conversation with myself today. Because this is something I really want to live into during this season. I think it can be beneficial for us all. And I do believe that God is doing amazing things here.
Absolutely.
At Grace Church. I've never been more convinced of it in my time on staff, and also just as a kid and a teenager here. I've never been more convinced that God's doing incredible things. And I want to partner with him in what he's doing.
Yeah.
And to me, this is another way to do that. And I hope that you all will too.
Yeah. Matter of fact, we just want to invite you into that. We start the season of Lent on Wednesday. We have Ash Wednesday service at all 3 campuses. It's 7 o'clock at the Central Campus, 6:30.
6:30 here.
And I think it's 7 o'clock at the Shores as well, to just begin asking yourself that question. Like, what are you seeking first, your stuff or the kingdom of God? And what do you need to lay down so that you can take up something else? And we hope you'll join us on that journey and throughout the season of Lent as we lead toward Easter. And we will see you again next week. We'll be taking a look at part 1 of a brand new sermon series that's just going to be incredible.
Through Lent and Easter, all the way through.
That we're talking about some individuals and their encounters with Jesus, and we've prepped 2 of those, right? And it's awesome. You're in for a great message series. So hope you're having a good week, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.